We've all seen it happen. Handguns that just vanish. No fanfare, no grand exit, just a quiet fade into the surplus pile or a footnote in some collector's guide. Colt 2000 All-American, Remington R51, Taurus Curve, what have you. But every so often, there's one that comes storming back. Not as a retro cash grab, not a limited reissue, but something completely unexpected. The kind of comeback the original maker swore would never happen. And yet, it did. Without them. And the real kick in the nuts, some Glock owners are dumping their carry pieces just to get one. In this video, we're diving into how a stack of forgotten factory frames and one relentless engineer brought a cult classic back from the grave. We'll unpack how this old-school squeeze cocker got rebuilt from the ground up, dodged the IP minefield, and now has a real shot at stealing the spotlight from today's biggest sellers. You won't want to miss this one. It's the comeback no one saw coming. So, back in the late 70s, the German police wanted a sidearm that could be carried cocked with a round in the chamber yet remain absolutely safe until the instant an officer decided to fire. Heckler & Koch met that brief with a pistol that fused a gas-delayed blowback system to a squeeze cocker front strap. The idea was simple, at least on paper. Grip the gun, squeeze the front strap lever, and the striker is fully cocked only while that pressure is maintained. Release the lever, and the striker returns instantly to rest, decocking the pistol even if a finger is still on the trigger. That mechanism, paired with a fixed, cold hammer-forged barrel sitting impossibly low over the hand, produced a service sidearm that shot flatter than many target guns, delivered groups small enough to make revolver shooters jealous, and earned a reputation for safety that few autos of the period could match. But it was also a machining nightmare. Every component was cut, drilled, pinned, or broached to hair-splitting tolerances. The gas piston under the barrel required its own cross-pin jig. The slide was a multi-part weldment, and the squeeze cocker linkage inside the grip looked more like clockwork than combat hardware. Even the polygon-rifled barrel used specialty French steel that had to be hammer-forged on dedicated mandrels. From day one, H&K printed full-page ads explaining why it cost nearly twice as much as a Browning High Power. And those ads were completely honest. The gun was effectively a handmade instrument. So, what is that gun? Well, it's the P7. It's got this uncompromising build quality, which is why it lasted in the rigors of police duty. But it also turned out to be its Achilles heel, the exact same reason why H&K pulled the plug. The machines were old, the skilled labor was expensive, polymer-framed striker pistols were already eating market share, and every new P7 left the factory at a loss. With Oberndorf done, collectors pounced. German police trade-ins once stacked in warehouse crates suddenly commanded four-figure prices. Pristine private market M8s and M13s crossed the $3,000 mark. The rare 22, 32, and 380 K3 variants became literal museum pieces. The design became legendary precisely because it became unattainable. That sense of loss is what drew a Texas engineer named Brett into the rabbit hole. He had carried a P7 for over a decade and loved everything about it except the looming fear that one day a broken recoil spring or cracked piston cup would turn his prized pistol into a 30-ounce paperweight. Spare parts were drying up, factory barrels were already unobtainium, and gunsmiths who understood the squeeze cocker were aging out of the trade. Brett began the unglamorous way, reverse engineering the little coil springs that most often tired out. The HK Pro Forum noticed, demand snowballed, and soon he was fabricating tiny two-piece plungers, detents, and pins. Each success fed the next problem until incremental fixes were no longer enough. The community needed complete pistols, not just repairs. The breakthrough came when Brett located a cache of 92 unfired P7 M8 frames, apparently boxed up during the final production run and forgotten in a logistics limbo. No slides, no barrels, just stripped frames coated in factory preservative. With those frames as a legal foundation, he secured a Class 7 manufacturing FFL, bought CNC time, and spent 18 months replicating the most difficult parts. He ordered the exact high-grade chrome moly steel H&K once specified from A&D in France, had custom polygonal mandrels produced, then cold hammer forged new barrels at Rim Country Manufacturing. After forging, each blank was stress-relieved, finish machined, heat-treated, cryo-quenched, and finally, plasma nitrided. Slides proved even trickier. The originals were three-piece assemblies welded, milled, and finish ground to plus or minus 0.02 of an inch. Brett built dedicated work-holding fixtures, welded breech blocks of 17 to 4 pH stainless into slide bodies, and cut serrations deep enough for modern gloved hands without compromising strength. With barrels and slides solved, he tackled cosmetics. Rather than bluing or parkerization, he opted for black nitride, a salt bath ferritic nitrocarburizing process that hardens the surface to about 60 RC and leaves a deep graphite sheen that laughs off sweat, holster wear, and even mild solvents. Naysayers worried that nitride demanded exotic cleaners, but Brett had already run thousands of rounds through test pistols cleaned with nothing fancier than ballistol and plain hops 9. Heat management, the one perennial complaint about P7s, drove his next upgrade, a limited run of titanium frames milled from grade 5 billets on a 5-axis machine, diffusion hardened, then DLC coated. Titanium's lower thermal conductivity means the gas piston's heat soaks more slowly, giving shooters a few extra magazines before the trigger guard starts to sting. At this point, anyone following the project asked the same question. How is this legal without H&K's permission? The answer rests in the patent timeline. The squeeze cocker and gas-delayed blowback patents filed in 1976 expired in the mid-90s. Once those 20 years elapsed, the mechanical design entered the public domain. While trademarks such as the HK logo and the name P7 remain protected, the underlying mechanism is free for anyone to recreate. Brett, therefore, branded his company P7 Pro, never stamped an H&K logo, and marketed each pistol simply as a modern squeeze cocker built on original German frames. Intellectual property attorneys confirmed the approach, and a subtle but important labeling choice, serial numbers on the slide read P7 Pro M8 instead of HK P7 M8, ensured zero trademark confusion. The first production wave shipped in June 2024. Buyers who had placed orders by email received tracking numbers and, a few days later, pistols that looked factory fresh yet carried features the Bundespolizei armorers of the 80s could only dream about. Every gun was test-fired for function. Each included documentation on nitride care, and threaded barrel customers could choose half by 28 or 13.5 millimeter left-hand threads. Suppressor aficionados finally had a squeeze cocker host that would cycle 147-grain subsonic loads, thanks to an updated chamber geometry and heavier recoil springs. Because the barrel is fixed, the system needs no Nielsen device, so a simple direct thread can and a fixed mount are all that is required. A dead arrow Desa 9, shortened to 6 baffles, balances perfectly, keeps gas back pressure reasonable, and maintains the pistol's famously trim profile. Options were deliberately limited in the inaugural batch to streamline assembly on those rescued German frames. Customers could choose plain black nitride slides with legacy HK dovetails or spend a bit more for a slide pre-milled to accept factory HK sights while still gaining a modern ledge rear. Even in that restrained form, the package undercut the used market price of a surplus P7 once the buyer factored in new springs, possible barrel replacement, and the inevitable custom sight work. One early recipient posted that he would have paid more for a pristine vintage example, then still needed to thread the barrel, refinish the slide, and pray the gas piston sleeve wasn't corroded. Instead, he picked up a pistol that looked new, shot softer, ran cooler, and came suppressor ready. As those 92 frames reached owners, P7 Pro shifted focus to the next phase. True American-made frames cut from 70-75 T6 aluminum for weight and cost savings, 41-40 steel for traditionalists, and a limited titanium series for collectors who crave bragging rights. The aluminum version incorporates an accessory rail machined directly into the dust cover, answering decades of user requests for a weapon light on a squeeze cocker. The steel frame mirrors the original profile yet subtly thickens critical lug walls to counter stress risers observed during destructive testing, a durability tweak invisible to anyone without calipers. All three frame materials use a reshaped gas block that increases surface area, wicking heat faster and reducing trigger guard burn on extended strings. Slide evolution happens in parallel. The next generation drops the obsolete HK dovetail and adopts a Novak footprint, instantly opening dozens of aftermarket sight options and allowing inexpensive dovetail plates for micro red dots. Brett demonstrated a prototype optics-ready slide at a regional range day, pairing a Shield RMSC footprint with co-witness iron sights. The crowd reaction bordered on disbelief. The P7's famously low-bore axis already keeps recoil minimal, and adding a dot made double taps feel like cheat codes. Doubters worried that cutting an optic window might weaken the slide roof. But finite element stress analysis plus 5,000-round torture tests showed no cracking or pinwalking. Caliber curiosity naturally followed. During its factory life, the P7 family stretched into 40 Smith & Wesson with the M10 and even experimented with a one-off 45 ACP prototype, though the latter never left R&D. P7 Pro evaluated both 40 and 357 SIG using high-speed cameras to study gas piston dwell, feed angle geometry, and slide velocity. Early results indicate 40 is viable with minor tweaks to port diameters and recoil springs, while 357 SIG may demand a longer slide to bleed pressure safely. 10 mil, often requested by enthusiasts, remains unlikely because the magazine stack angle and grip dimensions would require a total redesign. Instead, the company plans to revisit the K3 concept by offering a limited-run 380 ACP model, betting that modern defensive 380 loads and the pistol's fixed barrel will deliver surprising performance in a subcompact niche. The ordering process itself fits the boutique nature of the enterprise. There is no shopping cart website blasting banner ads. Interested buyers still email info@p7pro.com, describe their must-have features, and receive an invoice once a slot opens in the production calendar. That slower cadence creates a sense of community rather than anonymous consumption. Customers share photos of serial numbers in ascending order, compare barrel thread caps, and speculate on the exact shade difference between DLC and QPQ nitride. The enthusiasm has translated into steady, fully booked runs months in advance, proving that passion projects can thrive without venture capital marketing budgets. Why does this revival resonate so powerfully? Partly because the P7 always defied trends. It was never polymer, never double action, and never cheap. In an era of striker pistols that all field strip the same way, a squeeze cocker demands engagement. Grip strength cocks the striker, muscle memory releases it, and the linear trigger feels like a tuned 1911 after the first millimeter of take-up. The fixed barrel feeds hollow points flawlessly. The fluted chamber floats brass out of the port even if the extractor claw snaps, and the gas piston delays cycling just enough to keep slide speed gentle and empty cases stacking in neat piles beside the shooter. Bringing that experience to new shooters at a price comparable to other premium carry guns is less about nostalgia and more about proving that mechanical ingenuity still matters. Recommendations for anyone considering the leap are straightforward. If you want the purest callback to the 80s, grab one of the remaining German-frame P7 Pro M8s while they last. You'll own a slice of manufacturing history paired with the reliability of fresh internals. If accessory rails and optic compatibility are mandatory, wait for the aluminum frame Novak slide variant slated for the end of the year. Those who obsess over weight savings should save now for the titanium frame because the run will be tiny, and resale values already look bullish. Finally, suppressor fans should specify the heavier recoil spring and altered chamber to maximize function with 147 grain loads. Doing so turns an already soft pistol into something that barely moves between shots. Collectors often worry about part support, but this project addresses that fear head-on. Springs, pins, barrels, magazines, and even stamped trigger housings are now being produced domestically with CAD files stored redundantly. That supply chain independence means future repairs will not rely on dwindling European surplus. It also means the design can iterate if a stronger piston material presents itself or a better finish process emerges. P7 Pro can incorporate it without seeking permission from a corporate parent. As for longevity, early endurance testing looks promising. Sample pistols have exceeded 12,000 rounds without measurable loss of barrel throat diameter, and the nitride finish shows only faint polish lines where the slide rides frame rails. Gas piston seals remain intact, spring rates hold spec, and the squeeze cocker lever still breaks at the same 12 pounds initial squeeze and 1.5 pounds hold weight as new. Those metrics, more than any marketing copy, speak to the durability shooters expect from a sidearm designed originally for counter-terror police. The story does more than satisfy gearheads. It illustrates a broader trend of enthusiasts taking ownership of discontinued classics. Just as boutique makers tried to resurrect the Colt Python and small shops cloned the Browning High Power before Colt, Springfield, and FN jumped back in. The P7 Pro proves that a dedicated craftsman with modern tools can reclaim designs abandoned by major manufacturers. Ultimately, with this classic gun is neither a nostalgia trip nor a cynical cash grab. It is the natural outcome of unsatisfied demand meeting accessible CNC technology and expired patents. The result is a pistol that blends old-world precision with new-world practicality, delivering the squeeze-cocker experience to a generation that grew up believing every serious carry gun had to share parts with a Glock or a SIG. So now you know how one man brought back a Cold War-era legend, rebuilt it stronger, and gave it a future the original company never dared. Would you stick to your Glock 19 or sell it to buy a P70 Pro? Which configuration appeals to you the most? The rail-ready aluminum, the optics-cut slides, or that titanium unicorn? Drop your thoughts in the comments, then hit like, share this video with your gun crew, subscribe for more deep dives, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss the next revival.